Welcome to Passion for Sound, the channel dedicated to thorough and honest reviews of headphones, earphones, DACs, headphone amps, other components and accessories. Basically everything audio related except power amps and passive speakers. My name's Lachlan and my goal is to explore and discuss all kinds of audio topics, even the controversial ones, to help us all find more enjoyment from music. Thanks for watching and enjoy the video. Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review, and today something a little bit different from the usual in looking at a couple of relatively affordable aftermarket headphone cable options. Specifically what I've got here in front of me is a Hart Audio Cables headphone cable and the Apos Flow cable. Both of these are terminated in 3.5mm connectors and therefore suited to the HiFiMan range of headphones as well as many others. But I'm focusing most of my comments today on various listening with the HiFiMan headphones. The good news is, in both cases, you can get them terminated in all sorts of different options. So you can get them for Sennheisers, you can get 3.5mm, 2.5mm, single entry, double entry, lots of different options are available, and the cable quality itself is going to stay the same. So even though I'm going to be talking about HiFiMan headphones in relation to today's review, do know that everything I'm about to say is going to be transferable to any headphone you try these with. The only thing I can't guarantee is the differences you're going to hear compared to the stock cables. And on that note, let me clarify something really quickly. Some people may question whether there's any sonic benefit in changing over the cables for headphones. In my experience and my listening over the years, I've heard headphone and earphone cables that I've loved and some that I've hated, and that tells me that something is going on. I'm not here to try to convince anyone if it is or it isn't. If you're not someone who believes in sonic differences, that's completely fine. I'm going to be talking about the ergonomics and practicalities of both cables as well, so you can just watch for that part. For those that also believe that cables can make a sonic difference, I'll cover that off too. So feel free to pick and choose the information you want and disregard the stuff that you don't. The good news is that in both cases, neither cable is overly expensive. The Hart audio cables which are here in this box come in a variety of prices depending on the format you get. And what I mean by that is that they have a system that uses different interconnects for the last little bit of the cable, and therefore you can mix and match the terminations you use. I'll cover that off in detail shortly, but to put things into quick perspective, you're looking at about $75 for what I've got here from Hart, and you're looking at $119 for what I've got here from Apos Audio. So in neither case are you spending a fortune. That said, I'm not sitting here suggesting that you should spend $120 on a cable for a pair of headphones that might cost you $100. This is something that in my mind you start doing when you know you're going to be spending more money on headphones, either because you own them already, that being a higher end headphone, or because you know that in time you're going to upgrade. So for example, you might have a pair of HE400 SEs right now, which cost about $149. You're going to be spending almost the same amount again on the Apos Flow cable. Initially, I would question whether that was a good investment, given that you might be wanting to spend money on a DAC or an amp that's going to be having more impact on your sound chain. However, what we also know is that the same cable that you could buy for your HE400 SE will then fit your Sundara if you buy that in the future, an Ananda, an Arya, an HE1000, or even a Susvara. So it's great that you could invest in a cable now that's going to take you the whole way through. So I just want to flag that cables are not a necessity. They're an add-on which might bring you a 1 or 2% improvement in the sound, but they're not going to change everything drastically. Or they shouldn't. If they are, something's probably wrong. So they're a nice tweak, they're a nice adjustment, but do put them into context as to the importance. Spend the money on headphones, DACs and amps before you start thinking about cables, unless it's an investment for a long-term future plan. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's start talking cables.
Let's be on our way now.
going to start with the Hart Audio because it's a little bit cheaper overall. As you can see, they come in this fantastic Pelican case, which I just love. Not because you need a Pelican case for a cable, but because if you happen to order the interconnect kit, which I did, then you're going to get multiple different connections and it's nice to have somewhere to store them. So what I have in front of me here is the cable itself that you get from Hart Audio, and then what I've got here is their interconnect multi-kit. So it comes with a 4.4mm Pentacon connector here. It comes with a 3.5mm with a screw-on 6.3mm adapter, and it comes with a 4-pin XLR. On the other end of each of these cables, these interconnects, is a 4-pin mini XLR. What that then means is that on the end of your headphone cable at the amplifier end, you've got the opposing 4-pin mini XLR. What that therefore means is you can take whichever interconnect suits, click it together, and now I've got a 4-pin XLR cable. If I then want to change over, and maybe I'm going to use this for portable use with a DAP that's got 4.4mm, I just change to 4.4mm. So one cable, many purposes. It's a fantastic system. I think it's absolutely ingenious that they've done this. Now, as I've already mentioned, I've got mine terminated to the 3.5mm connections at each end to suit the HiFiMans, but you can get different terminations. You can also get the cable in red, or what they call, I think, slightly grey, which is a black and grey mixture. The cable itself is a decent weight, although it's still fairly light. So depending on your preferences, it might be a bit too light for some, it might be just right for others. I'd say it's probably a little bit lighter in weight than something like the stock HiFiMan Sundara cable, but that's probably also due to the heavier rubber style insulation on the Sundara cable, whereas this has got a nice soft fabric. And that does bring me to a little bit about the ergonomics. This is a lovely cable to interact with. As you can probably see from me handling it, it doesn't have any particular memory of shape. If I twist it or untwist it, it doesn't want to hold on to any particular pattern or kinks or anything like that. It's very comfortable to use. There's no major microphonics from it, unless you're looking for really extreme situations where you might be wearing some clothing that causes it, more so than the cable. All in all, it's just a real joy to use. Lengthwise, I do find it to be a pretty good length for desktop use, and I've just managed to tangle it as I've done this. But as you can see, it's got a fair amount of length for comfortable desktop use without draping all over the floor. I think from memory it's a 3-foot cable thereabouts, so it's just under or just about 1 meter long. And that's obviously without the interconnect on the end. So it's a great cable from an ergonomic point of view. It's amazing from a versatility point of view, having all the different interconnects. And I should mention at this point that you don't have to buy it with all the interconnects. So you can choose to buy this cable as just the cable for $39 and add a single interconnect only, or you can add them over time for $14 to $18 depending on the interconnect. And that's all going to come down to the cost of the connectors. The other option though is what you see in front of me here, which is the multi-interconnect kit, and that's $36. So basically, if you know you're going to have 2 or more connectors in your life, you might as well get the multi-kit. I love having this because I can jump between 4-pin XLR if I'm using the Soloist. I can then go to the 4.4mm Pentacon if I'm using the Singer SA1 or my DX300 DAP. And then if I'm using the TT2 or my Aries or Elekit 8200R, I can come back to 6.3mm. So I love the versatility that this setup provides. One final thing that I can't tell you because it's not listed anywhere and I didn't want to pry too deeply was I don't know the exact quality of the wire inside the actual cable. A lot of companies list specifically which wiring they're using, whether it's pure copper, silver-plated copper, all those sorts of details, but Hart Audio are focused more on the usability and the connectivity than they are on the wire itself. The good news is, as I'll talk about soon, the quality of the wire seems to be really nice. Nothing special, but good solid quality. Before I talk about the sonics though, let's have a quick look at the Apos Flow. The Apos Flow cable, which I have here in red, is also available in black, and as I've already mentioned, it's $119. And I do believe that may vary depending on the terminations you get at the headphone end, because some of the connectors will have proprietary pricing, whether it's Limo connectors for a Focal Utopia, or the Sennheiser 2-pin connectors, or the Sennheiser HD800 style connectors, they might all have slightly different costs. So roughly $119 is the starting point to think about, but it may go up and down a little bit. Much like the Hart Audio cable, I've got a cable here that's about 1 meter long, and I've once again managed to tangle it. As you'll have seen with both cables, they're not prone to tangling, which is great. So this one's just a touch longer than the Hart cable, but again, this has already got the equivalent to the Interconnect connected. I've got this in a 4.4mm Pentacon, but you can once again get it with all different terminations at the amp end. Just as a side note, if you're ever buying a headphone cable with dual entries, I would always recommend getting a balanced connector at the amp end. Even if you're not using balanced right now, it's great to have the versatility because you can always adapt a 4-pin XLR or 4.4mm Pentacon down to a 6.3 or 3.5. You can never go the other way. So do keep that in mind. It's worth the expense of buying an adapter and a 4.4 or 4-pin XLR rather than having to come back and buy an entire new cable should you upgrade your amp in the future. With that out of the way, let's talk a bit more about the Apos Flow. Once again, it's a lovely cable to deal with. It's got nice fabric wrapping around it, which makes it much nicer to interact with than a lot of the rubber cables that come with various headphones, particularly HiFiMan's, as I've discussed a lot on this channel. And the Apos Flow is probably just a little bit nicer feeling again than the Hart audio cable. The fabric used on the outside is nice and soft, but it's a slightly thicker gauge and it does give a slightly more luxurious feel. It's a very, very minor difference and it's probably not alone worth the extra money, but it is something I wanted to mention. The plugs also feel nice and premium, and I should mention that in both cases, all of the connectors feel pretty good. The Hart audio cable 4-pin XLR is probably the weakest lot of the bunch. It does feel like a cheaper plug compared to something like a Nutric, for instance, but it is completely serviceable and I have no concerns. So at this point, what we've got are two cables that are ergonomically fantastic. In the case of the Hart audio, it is outstandingly versatile. And in both cases, I think they are very good upgrades on the stock cables that you get with most headphones. They don't hold a shape or want to kink and bend. As you've seen twice, they're really easy to unravel or unkink if you happen to get a tangle in them. And so if you're just looking at these from an ergonomic perspective, it's really hard to go against either of them. Personally, if you're not interested in sonics, I would just go straight for the Hart audio cable. The versatility options they provide are simply outstanding, and therefore if it's just ergonomics and versatility you're looking for, look no further than Hart audio cables. However, if you're also wondering about the sonic characteristics of these cables, then let's talk about that now. The first thing I wanted to do was compare it against some stock cables from a couple of HiFiMan headphones. After that, I moved into comparing the two cables directly. And so let's start with the Sundara. The stock Sundara cable isn't too bad in the scheme of things when it comes to HiFiMan cables, but as you can immediately see, it wants to hold a shape. It never really loses the coil. The plugs and the connectors also come across a little bit DIY, particularly at the amp end, and of course it only comes with a 3.5mm connector. So straight away, ergonomically speaking, and in terms of having the different connections available that you might want, both the Hart and the Apos cable make great sense with the Sundara. In terms of sound quality, the Hart audio cable provided a nice slight improvement from the stock Sundara cable. What it did was it just opened up the sound a little bit. It gave a slightly better impression of detail and separation within the sound. Like I said at the beginning, it's not a huge shift, it's not changing the character of the headphone, but in my opinion, it is slightly improving the sound quality. I'm not going to go into detail on the Apos cable. Suffice to say for now that I think the Apos cable does everything the Hart audio cable does and just a little bit better still. So in short, I believe both the Hart audio cable and the Apos Flow are excellent upgrades for the Sundara, both ergonomically but also sonically they bring a slight improvement. And so then I took it up a notch and looked at the HiFiMan Ananda. The Ananda here ships with this god-awful mess of medical tubing. And that's an ongoing joke now. I think it started off with Convince Me Audio talking about this. The cables that come with the Ananda look like they're sheathed in terms of the insulation in something that would come off a catheter. It's a horrible, hard-feeling rubber. It looks dreadful in this sort of weird, beigey, goldy, just nothing sort of colour, and as you can see in front of me, it just wants to hold all kinds of shape that you really don't want it to. So I'm going to put that aside immediately because it's really not fun to interact with. As far as I know, the Ananda and also the same exact cable which comes with the Sasvara, and I think probably used to with the Arya as well, as far as I know, that uses a combination of copper and maybe silver or silver-plated copper cables. In my experience, those silver-plated copper cables come with a bit of extra bite in the treble. And so moving over to the Hart audio and the Apos cables, what I experienced was actually a slightly smoother overall sound. And I mean that in a good way. Particularly with a headphone like the Ananda, where it does have a little bit of treble bite, it was really nice to have that bite tamed just a little bit by the cable. Again, we're not talking night and day differences, but it's just a tiny bit smoother through the treble, and I think that's a good thing for the Ananda. So once again, overall, we've got cables here providing ergonomic benefits that are immediately very obvious. And then over and above that, I do believe there is a slight sonic improvement. Again, it's a 1 or 2% thing, but I do think it's worthwhile. Consistently throughout all of my testing of these cables with these headphones, in each case, the Hart audio cable was a slight upgrade. Let's say it's 1% improvement. And then the Apos audio was another 1% on top, or roughly in that range. Obviously, this is subjective, it's impossible to put numbers to it, but my point being the Apos Flow cable is just a little bit better across the board than the Hart audio cable, but both are improvements over the stock cables so far from the Sundara, the Ananda, the HE400SE as well, which I probably should have mentioned here. It's also much better compared to the HE400SE cable. And then the final cable I tested it with was the cable that comes with the brand new HiFiMan Arya. The new HiFiMan Aryas also come with a new cable. Now, if you want to know what I think about the HiFiMan Aryas, the new stealth magnet version, the review of that is coming very, very soon. So do stay tuned. All I'm going to say for now is it is definitely a review you're going to want to watch. So make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for that one. For now though, let's talk just about the cable. Thankfully, HiFiMan have decided to provide a better quality cable than the one that ships with the Ananda, and now it looks like this. So it's a black fabric wrapped cable. It's got some nice molded plugs that, whilst looking very industrial style, they're good quality and they're going to protect the cable from breakages. That said, it's still not a particularly premium feeling cable. It feels like a cable that I would expect to get with a cheap basic headphone, not with a $1,000 headphone like the Arya. It's not bad, but it's just not particularly good either. Ergonomically speaking, it's a big upgrade. As you can see, it's not quite as horrible to work with compared to the old medical tubing style cables, but at the same time, it's not also wonderful. It's passable and it's fine. What you might have also noticed is it's quite a bit shorter than the cables used to be, and for me that's quite a good thing. I think the cables, whilst I prefer a slightly longer cable, even than something like the Hart and the Apos, I'd much prefer a cable of this length, or the length of these two aftermarket cables, compared to these super long cables that drape on the ground, they get stuck under the rollers and chairs, all those sorts of issues with long cables I'd much prefer to do without. So it's a good length, it's definitely an upgrade over the old cables, but as you'll hear me talk about in a second, it's still not as good as something like the Hart or the Apos Flow. And so let me break down why. Sonically, moving between the stock cable from the Arya and the Hart and the Apos, the differences I heard were much more subtle than those with the Sundara cable and also the Ananda cable. And so at this point what I'd say is that I think you're reaching a point where you're not going to get any significant sonic changes or benefits in buying aftermarket. Where it's still going to be a benefit though is in the ergonomics. So if I pick up the Apos Flow, straight away, having just seen me interact with the cable for the Aryas, you'll see here that this is soft, it's supple, it's not holding any kinks or coils, and it just means it drapes in a much more comfortable way while listening to it. It doesn't want to coil and pull across your desk or down around your waist if you've got a device in your pocket that you're listening to. It's just a much more enjoyable product to interact with. And so for me, that's about the only reason I would recommend one of these with the Aryas is for the ergonomics. You're not getting huge sonic benefits at this point. And so having reached the peak of where I think it makes a difference buying these cables sonically for any of these headphones, I think ergonomically it's a no-brainer across the board. But when you're talking sonics, let's have a quick chat about the sound profiles or the sound characteristics of the Hart audio versus the Apos Flow. As far as I can tell, both of these are using a pure copper wire. The Apos Flow is published as being a 6N copper wire, meaning that it's 99.99997%, I think it is in the case of the Flow. But either way, very, very pure. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that the Hart audio cable is maybe just a tiny bit less pure in terms of the copper content. Or maybe it's just a different thickness of wire, but there are very subtle sonic differences between the two. when both used on exactly the same headphone, no matter which one it was, what I heard was that the Hart audio cable provides just a slightly thicker presentation. Everything's not quite as separated and resolved, I guess you'd call it, on the Hart audio cable compared to the Apos Flow. Again, the differences are subtle, but it's definitely there. In other words, when I switch from the Hart audio cable over to the Apos Flow, what I hear is a more open sound with a better sense of separation between instruments. It's like the signal coming through is getting through cleaner and with less sort of disruption, alteration, whatever it might be. And that can come down to things like purity of the copper, the way the wires themselves are arranged within the cable. There's lots of different factors based on my reading over the years that can contribute to how a cable sounds. As part of my testing for this, knowing that I don't have any way of actually measuring the differences here, I thought a single track listening to both of these cables on that same track might provide some interesting clarity. And the track that I was listening to was The City by Fleetwood Mac. Whilst both cables, and I think I was listening with the Arias if I recall correctly, both cables provided sound that was fantastic through the Arias. What I noticed though was that when I went from the Hart audio cable over to the Apos Flow, everything just got a little bit more open still. I found with the Flow that the vocal was better separated from the rest of the mix slightly. And again, nothing dramatic, it was just a subtle shift where rather than everything kind of being a bit all together, now the vocal just was able to separate itself just a little bit. And again, it reminds me of the sorts of differences I hear when something is done to remove noise in a system. I'm not saying that the Hart audio cable is noisy, I'm just saying that it seems to me the transmission of the signal is more pure and more perfectly uninterrupted from the Apos Flow. That same benefit of clarity and purity of signal meant that listening with the Apos Flow, things like cymbals had just a little bit more texture and nuance to their delivery. So the sorts of changes that I'm noticing tend to be things that come from your more high frequency content, whether it's spatial cues and those subtleties that give a better imaging focus, or whether it's the actual details and texture that again come through in those treble frequencies. Ultimately, I think both of these cables are absolutely fantastic. In most cases, they're going to provide a subtle improvement to sound, but more importantly, they're both wonderful from an ergonomic point of view. If you're only looking at ergonomics, as I've already said, I think the Hart audio cable is an absolute winner. But if you're looking for a high quality performing cable as well, the Apos Flow, in my opinion, gives you a really nice lift in quality without having to spend big bucks. I've got some crazy expensive headphone cables here that I've collected over the years in different ways. I've also got some moderately priced headphone cables using things like pure Litz copper construction and the like. And whilst there are, in my opinion, benefits in spending even more money still, it all depends on your budget, your preferences, and what headphones you're listening to them with. For example, I didn't bother testing these with the HiFiMan Sundara because a headphone at that level, for me, requires a cable at a higher level than either of these. It's not that these sound bad or in any way degrade the quality of the Sundara, it's just that when you put a nice high quality Litz cable with something like the Sundara or the Empyreans or the Utopias, you do start to hear an extra level of detail. That said, I would never recommend a cable like that for something like the Sundara or even the Ananda probably. The Arya is about the point at which I might consider spending more, but having said that, after listening to the Hart audio and the Flow, I would absolutely comfortably say the Flow would be my choice if you're buying yourself an Arya. It's a great cable that basically maintains, maybe slightly improves the sound from the stock cable, and is ergonomically wonderful. Of course, you can get it in plain black if you don't like the red, so don't worry about that aspect of it. And also, I may not have mentioned before, but the Flow does come in longer lengths. From memory, you can get this version, which is that sort of 1 meter-ish version, or you can get a 10 meter version, which is pushing up towards 2 meters. I think it's about 1.8. So to bring all this to a close, what we've got here are two fantastic cables, both that are ergonomically excellent, sonically maybe a slight improvement, but most importantly, they're really, really affordable for a good quality cable. If either of these have caught your interest, I'll put links below for both of these companies where you can go and pick up those cables. In the case of Hart Audio, there's no kickbacks or affiliates there. It's just a way of saying thank you to them for helping out with the cost of the cables for me to make this review. And in the case of Apos, they are a channel affiliate, so any purchases you do make using the link below through to Apos will provide a small amount of income to the channel, and I'm always incredibly grateful for those that use that option. As always, if you found this review useful, I'd love it if you'd hit subscribe and like. Don't forget, I've got the review of the Aryas coming up soon. That's the new Stealth Magnet edition. A friend of the channel is sending me his 2020 version Aryas, so I'm going to be directly comparing the old Aryas, or the somewhat not as new Aryas, with the brand new ones, so do stick around for that one and make sure you subscribe. For now though, I'll leave it to the music, so happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.